Today, we're diving into a story that, honestly, when I first saw it, I was kind of like, wait, what is going on here?
Yeah, I can see that.
It's about the recent conviction of Sean Kingston. Remember Sean Kingston? Beautiful girls.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful girls. Who was inescapable for a while there.
Yeah.
And his mother, Janice Turner, on federal wire fraud charges. And it's the kind of news that makes you stop and say, wait a minute, what is happening here? So we're going to try and figure out what this is all about.
Yeah. It's interesting, when you look at how fast this all went down legally, after the indictment was issued, it's pretty remarkable. They were both, Sean Kingston and Janice Turner were found guilty on all the counts of federal wire fraud they were facing. And this all happened in a Fort Lauderdale, Florida courtroom.
Wow.
And get this, the jury was only out for like 3.5 hours.
Oh, wow.
Which seems to indicate that the prosecution really had their ducks in a row,
Yeah. I mean, that really does sound like an open and shut case when you think about it.
Yeah.
So okay, federal wire fraud.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds serious. What exactly were they convicted of? Like, what kind of scheme are we talking about here?
So the indictment laid out a pretty clear pattern of alleged fraud, and it targeted a bunch of different businesses. A jewelry company, a high-end bed company, a place selling exotic used cars, even a company that sells those crazy expensive micro-LED TVs. It really paints a picture of them wanting all this luxury stuff, but with seemingly no intention of actually paying for it properly.
That's kind of hard to believe, really.
It is.
How could they pull this off? I mean, with so many different types of businesses.
Well, the prosecution really hammered home the point that Kingston's celebrity status was essential to the whole operation. They basically showed how he used his fame and all his social media clout to project an image of wealth and trustworthiness. They convinced these sellers to part with their goods before a single dime actually changed hands.
But his fame was basically like an unwritten guarantee that the money would come through.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So then what about his mother, Janice Turner? She wasn't just a bystander, was she?
No, it seems like she played a less visible but still really important role. According to the indictment, she handled a lot of the back and forth with these companies after the initial contact, confirming delivery dates and other details. So her regular communication probably reassured the sellers that everything was legit. It helped to maintain the illusion of a normal business deal.
Right. So Kingston's name gets his foot in the door, his mom keeps the ball rolling.
Yeah.
But when does the actual fraud happen? How'd they pull that part off?
Well, that's where the whole wire fraud thing comes in. The indictment explains that the payments were made with wire transfers that turned out to be fake, basically worthless.
Oh.
The businesses saw the transfer go through. They thought they'd been paid, but the money never showed up, or it was clawed back after they'd already sent the stuff out. And of course, Kingston kept all this expensive merchandise without ever really paying for it. And they were allegedly doing this for years. Apparently, it all came to a head in March of 2024.
Wow, years. So what was the final straw? What led to the arrest in this whole trial?
Well, it all started with a SWAT team raid on Kingston's place in Florida back in May. That's when he was arrested in Fort Irwin, California. Then, in July 2024, a federal grand jury officially indicted both him and his mom on these wire fraud charges. And as you'd expect, they both pleaded not guilty to everything.
I bet it was pretty tense in the courtroom when the verdict came down. I read that there were some really emotional reactions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was a big moment, and reports say that both Kingston and his mother were clearly upset when they heard the guilty verdicts. They were both wiping away tears. It just goes to show you how serious the consequences can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what about their defense? What did their lawyers argue?
Well, Turner's lawyer tried to make her out to be a mother who was just fiercely protecting her son. The argument was that she was trying to keep him safe from people who might take advantage of his wealth.
Okay.
They even said she was suspicious of some of the businesses they were dealing with, a TV installer, jewelers, a car dealership. They basically painted her as a concerned parent, not someone intentionally involved in a fraud.
That's an interesting approach. What about Kingston himself? I heard he was thinking about testifying.
Yeah, at first he told the judge that he wanted to speak his truth, but he ended up not taking the stand. It's kind of interesting because that actually affected how the judge dealt with his bail.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, even though you might think not testifying would look bad, the Judge David Slybowitz, decided to let Kingston stay out on bond, partly because he didn't testify. His thinking seemed to be that since Kingston didn't speak up, it meant he wasn't a flight risk or that he wouldn't try to mess with the case.
Oh, I see. So I guess that same logic didn't apply to Janice Turner.
Nope. Judge Leibowitz decided to take Turner straight into custody after the verdict. He basically said that he thought her testimony during the trial was obstruction of justice. And he was worried that she might try to interfere with the legal process because she's so devoted to her son.
Man, that must have been a tough scene in the courtroom.
There are reports describing this really poignant moment where Kingston and Turner hugged each other right before she was taken away. It makes you think about the human side of all this legal stuff. And then as Kingston was leaving the courtroom, he actually thanked the judge for being fair. Then he just took off in a Lamborghini Urus SUV, ignoring all the reporters waiting outside. It's a pretty wild juxtaposition.
Yeah.
You know, the fancy car and the seriousness of the situation.
Yeah, definitely. So what happens now? What about the sentencing?
Both Sean Kingston and Janice Turner are scheduled to be sentenced on July 11th. That's when we'll find out what kind of punishment they're facing. Until then, Kingston's under house arrest and has to wear an electronic monitoring device. He also had to put up a hefty bond, including a house worth $500,000 and $200,000 in cash. And like we said, his mother's in federal custody.
Wow, it's a wild turn of events for someone who became so famous so quickly.
Well, let's talk a bit about Kingston's background. I mean, he's originally from Jamaica, and that really comes through in his music. Oh, absolutely. His whole style, that sing-songy rapping, is rooted in Jamaican musical traditions. It's actually part of a whole musical lineage that influenced the development of hip-hop. It's that blend of Caribbean rhythms and hip-hop that made him stand out and really connected with people.
Yeah, and it all really took off with Beautiful Girls back in 2007. I remember you couldn't escape that song.
It was a huge hit. When it came out, Kingston was only 17, and Beautiful Girls stayed at the top of the Billboard Top 100 chart for 4 whole weeks. It was a cultural phenomenon. And you know what else is interesting about that song? The melody is actually a sample from Ben E. King's Stand By Me, which is a classic. So it had this instant familiarity that made it resonate with people.
Right. And the music video was almost as popular as the song itself. It had a ton of views online, didn't it?
Oh yeah, the Beautiful Girls music video blew up online and eventually reached 1 billion views on YouTube in 2022. That's huge. It really shows how much of an impact Kingston had on pop culture at the time.
So here we have this story of a young artist who becomes a global star and then gets convicted of running a huge wire fraud scheme that targeted all these businesses using these fake wire transfers. Both him and his mother are found guilty, and now they're waiting to find out what their sentence will be.
Yeah, that's right. And the jury didn't waste any time finding them guilty, which really shows you how serious this all is. You know, there are real consequences to these kinds of actions.
This whole case makes you think about a lot of things, like the relationship between fame, wealth, and accountability. Does being famous and rich make you feel like you're above the rules? Or does it put you under a different kind of pressure and temptation? It makes you wonder how people in the spotlight handle those things.
It's about perception versus reality. You know, does achieving a certain level of fame and wealth make you feel invincible? Like the rules don't apply to you. This case forces us to think about that kind of psychological effect.
And it makes you think about the influence of celebrity in everyday life too. Did businesses let their guard down around Sean Kingston because of who he was? Did they rush things for him that they wouldn't have for an average person? It's a good reminder about how complicated things can get when you mix celebrity and business.
Definitely.
Well, it would be interesting to see what happens on July 11th.
For sure.
This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
See you.